Welcome to Market Revolution, 19th Century Industrial Age in America. This is Melinda Klein. With territorial expansion during the Jeffersonian presidency, Democrats had hopes that the yeoman farmer, the middle-class frontiersmen and artisans would contribute to the national economy, sending their products in turn to market. These manufactured goods would find their place in the U.S. economy. These were the economic hopes after the War of 1812. By 1816, Jefferson advised his fellow Democrats and businessmen to build factories. No one wanted to be caught as a dependent nation in time of war. And as history has shown, war had no time restrictions. It could happen at any time. The nation had to be ready. In America by 1815, most of the nation's manufacturing was done in households, small workshops, and river mills. The market revolution transformed this young America into a capitalist nation, the economic framework we work from today. It is and was market-oriented. Armies of farmers, artisans, merchants, and craftsmen making and selling their goods. With advances in transportation and communication, the American economy prospered in the North. However, this was not the evolution of the Southern economy. The agrarian South resisted industrialization. Former colonies stuck to their plantation, one-crop economies, with the landed aristocracy holding the political and economic powers. With this lack of economic diversity, the South became entrenched in slavery, ever more dependent on this volatile system of fear and oppression of other human beings. During the 40 years after 1815, the United States defined itself as a nation for the people, for liberty and commerce. The nation's boundaries expanded, first with the signed treaty with Spain in 1819, and then there was the Mexican-American War, 1847-1848. It had new religious goals, such as slavery was immoral, and the speed people did things with now changed time with saving inventions such as the cotton gin, railroads, steamships, power looms, and with state and federal funding of transportation systems such as railroads, bridges, roads, and canals, along with private investments, goods were moved faster over longer distances than ever before. By 1840, the U.S. claimed 35,000 miles of railroad track, and the telegraph linked rural communities with large commercial cities. Domestic trade was aided by the new government. Under President Monroe, he used protective tariffs to protect manufacturing, build roads to tie newly expanded market towns and farms together, and connected abundant rivers and lakes with a series of canals. The demand for cotton in England took off after 1815, when cotton became for the first time in history the clothing choice for the world. Cotton clothes were cheaper, easier to sew and wash, and more comfortable in warm weather. After 1815, 1 million slaves left the Chesapeake plantation states of Virginia and Maryland as plantation owners were transitioning to wheat and cattle production from tobacco. New states of Alabama, Georgia, and Mississippi became the new plantation culture destination in the South to grow cotton using slaves and Eli Whitney's cotton gin. This was the second wave of Chesapeake Bay area planters coming to the South. The first time was in the 1790s. Nat Turner, a Virginia slave, came to believe that it was his destiny to overturn slavery in Virginia. The rebellion led by Turner in 1831 led to new legislation in Virginia targeting blacks. After 1831, it was unlawful to teach a black slave to read or write. It was unlawful to allow blacks to travel off their plantations without permission. And finally, it was unlawful for blacks to congregate for any reason, including religious purposes. Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio became the new Northwest Territory. River settlements such as Cincinnati evolved from the growing number of people coming west during the first half-century. In New England, the textile industry, connecting with the cotton industry in the South, was the most dramatic example of industrial growth. The cost of clothing fell as small factories grew bigger, employed farm people, founded new markets, and paid low wages to migrant workers. Like in England, the first mass-produced, marketable items were made of cotton cloth. Small water-powered factories spun yarn and wove cloth after the Revolution on a small scale. Textile industrialization is illustrated with the Rhode Island system and the Waltham system. The cost of moving goods across long distances between 1815 and 1860 dropped by 90%. The telegraph, implemented from the 1840s, would greatly connect the nation as a whole. Time spent traveling, either for pleasure or business, was greatly reduced, and economies were connected, creating newer neighborhoods and experiences. The market revolution transformed family roles as well as household behaviors. No longer had to spin their own thread and yarn at home. With the availability of cheap cotton cloth in markets, families were expected to dress cleaner. This required women to spend more time mending, sewing, washing, and ironing than in previous generations. Expectations were to have a spotless home and just so in dressing. By the 1820s, anti-slavery talks in the North became heated meetings proclaiming morality and liberty to black slaves. The Senate decided they had to stop the spread of slavery. This effort became the Missouri Compromise. In 1822, President Monroe urged Congress to recognize the emerging new republics of Latin America. He worried that France, Spain, and Russia would make renewed efforts to colonize the continent. A new religion in America came out of the Second Great Awakening. They were the Mormons, founded by Presbyterian Joseph Smith. He was a New Yorker, poor, and like Nat Turner, was caught up in the revival movement. Following the lead in Europe, penitentiaries were created in New York and Pennsylvania. By 1820, Americans favored institutionalizing criminals, believing in this land of liberty, criminals should be denied their freedoms. Between 1840 and 1850, 1.5 million Europeans arrived in America, mainly through New York Harbor. By 1850, half of the residents of New York City were new immigrants. Many of the Irish stayed in the cities, whereas the Germans headed west, creating the dairy farms of Wisconsin and Minnesota. While the Industrial Revolution affected traditional roles of men and women, Puritan standards continues, with women as nurturing and patient, and men as public and vocal.